Here's what's happening at this hour. We'll start off with Super Bowl 57, where Chiefs wide receiver Mecole Hardman is officially out with the pelvis injury. The Chiefs placed Hardman on injured reserve earlier this afternoon while activating running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, Edwards-Helaire hasn't played since suffering a high ankle sprain back in Week 11. And elsewhere, Arizona Cardinals wideout A.J. Green says he's retiring after 11 NFL seasons. Green made the Pro Bowl in each of his first 7 seasons in the league, all with the Cincinnati Bengals. He walks away from the game with 727 career catches for more than 10,500 yards and 70 touchdowns. And over to golf, Justin Rose picked up his first PGA Tour victory in 3 years, winning the weather-delayed AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am by 3 strokes over Brandon Wu and Brendan Todd. Rose's most recent victory came at Torrey Pines in 2019 when he was ranked #1 in the world. The Eagles and the Chiefs have arrived in Arizona ahead of Super Bowl 57, and so has the Pick 6 podcast crew. The guys are getting you ready for the big game all week long from Glendale, so let's send it over to Will Brinson, Ryan Wilson, and John Breech for the Pick 6 rundown.
All right, welcome to the Super Bowl. We're back. Super Bowl LVII, is that right? We've been doing so many of these that it's hard to remember. Will Brinson, Ryan Wilson, and John Breech. We're going to break down all the pertinent storylines surrounding this Super Bowl. There's a ton of them. And, honestly, I'll say this, Wilson and Breech. These storylines for this particular Super Bowl, usually we got to, kind of really stretch things to, come up with enough storylines to fill 4 blocks. I think we could easily, get 8 blocks out of this because they just naturally occurred. Do you find that this Super Bowl in particular is more just chunk full of stories? It's like a chocolate chip cookie, a chocolate chunk cookie, full of storylines. Yes? No?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And Breech, I think the great thing for Brinson is that this is all about, you can come up with about 15 or 16 different revenge game angles, which is sort of Brinson's alley. And I think we're hitting all those highlights. But I would imagine you probably feel the same way.
Yeah, Brinson owns the revenge game angle. I mean, nobody does the revenge game beat better than Will Brinson. And you know what? I think it's more like an onion with the layers. You know, let's talk a little Shrek than a cookie. But yes,
okay,
a lot of storylines.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me at all if you just sat around your hotel room eating raw onions, Breech.
And watching Shrek.
And watching Shrek. That would check out for sure. I'm really more of a chocolate chip cookie guy. You can tell by the way when you look at me. But this is a revenge Super Bowl. Actually, I have like secret revenge games against each of you. We'll get to those later. We're going to start instead. Andy Reid. I don't believe for a second that Big Red isn't thinking revenge in this game. You're telling me, buy or sell, Andy Reid thinks this is a revenge game in his heart of hearts, his mind of minds.
I think Andy Reid is probably more concerned with finding the best barbecue
against the Eagles. Obviously, his old team.
His whole team, but he seems like he's like an old soul. He seems very happy with his lot in life, and playing for the coaching the Chargers with the Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes certainly helps that. But the bigger Andy Reid storyline for me is, if you guys remember a few years ago at the Miami Super Bowl, we did our Andy Reid off the bye dance, and it feels a lot similar to that, but it feels like that's more the issue here than revenge. Andy Reid doesn't strike me as a revenge type guy, sort of the hey Kool-Aid guy running through the locker room. He's more that guy, but he's 29-4 off the bye, Breech, and I feel like that's more important than him getting quote unquote revenge on the team that he leads in coaching victories when he left Philadelphia.
Ryan, I am going to have to say that I absolutely disagree with you here. I just 100% disagree. I do agree with the assessment that maybe Andy Reid doesn't seem like a revenge guy, but you don't know you're a revenge guy until you're put in a situation where you want revenge, and there's no way Andy Reid doesn't want revenge. And I think the big thing here is that you still have the people in charge of the Eagles who were in charge when he got fired. Howie Roseman's still the general manager. Jeffrey Lurie still owns the team. He definitely wants to stick it to those guys and say, hey, sorry you didn't win the Super Bowl. Sorry you fired me. And, hey, I just won my second Lombardi trophy in 4 years. So I think he would love to beat them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously winning the Lombardi trophy is the most important part. But if you have to extract your revenge to win the Lombardi trophy, then you're fine getting that revenge. And you look at his career against the Eagles since he left Philadelphia, became the Chiefs head coach, has won and covered all 3 times. Was a 7-point favorite in 2021, 4-point favorite in 2017, and a 3-point dog in 2013. Remember that game? That was stupid. They made Andy Reid a dog at the Eagles. He obviously covered, won the game. Andy Reid, I think I agree with each of you, actually. Like, Andy Reid has goodness in his heart. He is a, like, this is a true story. He literally met, it was Charles McDonald, I think, right? When he was working for SB Nation, introduced himself at the airport, and they exchanged mac and cheese recipes. Like, that's Andy Reid in a nutshell. But the guy wants revenge on Philly. Those people fired him. Howie Roseman ousted him. He wants revenge. He will maybe get it. The other revenge angle here from a coaching standpoint that is fascinating, Andy Reid, I don't think this is being played up enough, frankly. Andy Reid fired Nick Sirianni. No, he fired him. He fired him. He went in, he brought him into his office and said, "You are no longer with the Chiefs." Buy or sell, Andy Reid or Nick Sirianni wants revenge against Andy Reid for canning him in Kansas City.
So I'll offer some clarification to what you said factually is in fact true, but as Breech noted earlier when we were planning this show here, there was a change of staff. Andy Reid had been fired in Philadelphia. He was coming into Kansas City, and Sirianni was a part of the previous staff. So it's rare that you keep coaches, but that said, I get the sense that Nick Sirianni Breech can hold a grudge. He feels like someone who can manufacture grudges that don't exist in much the same way that those Patriots teams in the early 2000s when Rodney Harrison said no one believed in us when everyone believed in them every single week, and they use that as motivation. I think Sirianni will do that, and he may even be wearing an Allen Iverson jersey when he does it.
Yeah, Sirianni absolutely seems like the opposite personality type of Andy Reid. I feel like this is a downplayed storyline here where, hey, look, the Chiefs dumped me. There was no question. We don't want to keep you around. We have someone better that we want. We're going to shoot you off out to the West Coast.
Breech, or is it that they, like, you were a squatter in the house, and they bought the house and moved in, and they asked you to leave?
No, it's like if you break up with your girlfriend and you're still friends with some of her friends, and then you're like, yeah, I don't want to be friends with them anymore either. You can't, you're just getting rid of everyone. You can't just get rid of everyone if you're,
I mean, he had a job with the Chiefs, and the new Chiefs boss brought him in and said, "You are no longer employed by the Chiefs. You were fired by the Chiefs."
And he did talk about that. We mentioned that, talked about it on Monday, and he said, yeah, that puts a little chip on my shoulder. So I think it's actually a big chip.
Okay.
And there'd be nothing that would make him more happy than taking down the Chiefs and the guy who got rid of him.
I do think that Sirianni, not necessarily, like, I don't think that he necessarily like hates Andy Reid for it. I think he understands why Andy Reid did it because it is a changeover step. But like, I'd still be thinking about it. I mean, it would have crossed my mind over the last.
But you were one to hold a grudge, very much like Nick Sirianni.
We're doing my whole revenge segment thing here right now. Yeah,
Fair.
Of course. And by like Nick Sirianni got into a shouting match with Colts fans this year because Jim Irsay fired Frank Reich, his old boss, in the middle of the season. You think this guy isn't pissed off at the idea of being fired by Andy Reid? He also might be ticked off a little bit by not being a finalist, Ryan Wilson, for Coach of the Year. Buy or sell, Nick Sirianni wants revenge on people like Pete Prisco who didn't vote for him.
No, he definitely wants revenge, but I am of the opinion that while he had a fantastic year, and I'll put this question to you. You can answer in a second, Breech, because I know you are Matt LaFleur's doppelganger. And I would often ask the question, is Matt LaFleur a good coach or is it Aaron Rodgers? And I think that Sirianni actually is, in my mind, done a better coaching job in Philly than LaFleur has. But that's something that you can thumbs down in a second. But in terms of what this means, and you look at the graphic here, Dable has done a lot more with a lot less, and he did it quickly. Doug Peterson, Brinson's guy, same thing, even though they spent some money in free agency and they had their franchise quarterback. And Kyle Shanahan was down to quarterback 27, and they made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. So I think these guys are certainly more deserving. I'd even throw my guy, Sean McDermott, in there for how they went during the regular season. But I'm okay with Sirianni not being a finalist. That said, Breech, I know he's probably really angry about it.
Yeah, we're talking about chips on his shoulder. He probably has about 6 dozen there, and this is definitely one of them. It does feel like a snub, and he loves using snub. He's going to use this in the locker room. He's going to use this to motivate himself. I absolutely think if I'm ranking the top 5 candidates as you get to vote for 5 guys this year, that Sirianni is on my list.
3 for the
coach.
coach.
But either way, I'm Sirianni's on my top 3 list.
Yeah, Sirianni's top 3.
Because you talk about Dable doing more with less, but the Eagles were 9-8 last year. They won 14 games this year, and even though they didn't have a starting quarterback for 2 of them, and so that's a 5-win improvement over a team that was already good. So that's almost as difficult.
They're probably 16-1 with Jalen Hurts. If Jalen Hurts
plays every game, yeah. So
what I'm hearing here is that Breech has turned on Gardner Minshew.
Ooh, what a plot twist. Now Gardner Minshew's got a revenge game on you.
There you go.
All right, finally, in terms of a revenge segment, or the early revenge angle, Eric Bieniemy keeps continually snubbed for head coaching opportunities. Ryan Wilson, buy or sell that he wants revenge on
somebody.
Everyone.
No, I'm sure he's pretty frustrated. I went back and there were 10 head coaches hired last year. I think that's right. But I mean, I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't have been a better choice than Nathaniel Hackett in Denver. And, hindsight being 2020 and all that, I get it.
Breech's Onion would have been a better choice.
Breech's Onion, dressed up as Wilson the volleyball, would have been perhaps a better option. Lovie Smith, one and done, not entirely his fault in Houston. But, yeah, I'm sure he looks around the league. Dennis Allen probably, you could admit, underachieved in New Orleans as well. So he should be frustrated. We'll see what happens this coaching cycle. There have already been a couple head coaches hired, and it doesn't sound like Breech that he's going to be in the mix for some of the finalists from what we've heard, but maybe that changes. So I'm sure he's frustrated, and it's unclear whether he'll be with Kansas City after the season, too.
Yeah, well, I think the thing, if you're Eric Bieniemy, is you're pointing to this and putting the 2022 season as the top spot on your resume. You're saying, hey, look, we lost Tyreek Hill. We lost the most explosive receiver in the NFL, and yet, guess what? Still had the most points scored in the NFL, the Chiefs offense did. The most total yards in the NFL, the Chiefs offense did. And you're in the Super Bowl, even though you lost Tyreek Hill. And like you just said, the coaching carousel is pretty much done here. The Cardinals aren't going to hire him. The Colts will do something crazy, but it won't involve Eric Bieniemy. And so, yeah, he's going to have to wait till next year. So it is, I think, if you're him, you're definitely disappointed coming off this season that you didn't get a job.
And let's not sleep on the fact that, like Doug Peterson mentioned for Coach of the Year candidate, we have Mike Kafka is being interviewed for the Colts, like repeatedly. All these people from the Andy Reid coaching tree just continue to get jobs, right? And Eric Bieniemy just can't get one. I wouldn't blame him for having a little revenge in his heart. All right, take a break. Coming up, quarterback talk. Are the two best quarterbacks in the NFL playing in this game? We'll discuss coming up next here on the Pick Six Podcast on CBS Sports HQ.
Let's get to that news in 90 and starting off in Denver, where the Broncos introduced their new head coach, Sean Payton. His #1 challenge to fix Russell Wilson after a disastrous debut season in the Mile High City. Payton laid out his approach on Monday.
Here's what I know. I know he's a hard worker. I know he's an extremely hard worker. That's important. And I think you take that, you understand the skill set. He's won a lot of games in Seattle. We played him quite a bit just because we were both playoff teams in the NFC at that time. And then you go from there. And I think that's the same case, although it's a much more visible position, it's the same case and the same goal for us with every player on this roster. What do they do well? It's easy to point out what players don't do well. And there's certain coaches that tend to look at it that way, but I kind of was taught early on, hey, what is it they do well, and let's have them do those things.
Over to the NBA, Phoenix Suns guard Devin Booker will make his return to the lineup Tuesday night against the Brooklyn Nets. Booker has missed the past 5 games with a groin strain. Now, the last time that he played in a game was when the Suns lost to the Nuggets on Christmas Day. Over to baseball, the Minnesota Twins and shortstop Carlos Correa have mutually agreed that he will not play for Puerto Rico in this spring's World Baseball Classic. Now, Correa had his free agency this offseason turned upside down by an ankle injury, but the team says that his absence will be because of family reasons, with his wife expected to give birth in early March.
Welcome back to the Pick Six Podcast Show here on CBS Sports HQ, live from the Super Bowl in Phoenix, Arizona. Will Brinson, Ryan Wilson, John Breech. Look, we're like 10 years into doing this. I can't believe they still let us do it. I don't care. We'll take it. Speaking of guys who are doing this for like 10 years in a row, Patrick Mahomes feels like he's been to the Super Bowl for 10 straight years. It's actually only, the third out of 5 years.
Pretty good.
Not bad. Not a bad start to a career. You could ask for worse. Jalen Hurts, also just a 24-year-old quarterback, by the way. I think he's been in our collective football consciousness so long with Alabama and Oklahoma. People forget how young he is. Incredible matchup here at the Super Bowl between these two quarterbacks. And both dealing with an injury that's pretty important, guys. Which would you say is more important, more impactful for this game, Wilson? The Patrick Mahomes ankle injury or the Jalen Hurts shoulder injury, each of which we've seen at varying degrees affect them over the last month or so.
Yeah, but I think the difference for me is that Jalen Hurts seemed pretty okay, ready to go in that NFC Championship game. We saw him run a little bit, and in the week prior, or the 2 weeks prior, in the Week 17 game, he seemed less inclined to take a hit, and understandably so. But when they needed him in that final playoff game, Breach, he was all systems go. So the answer, I think, even though Patrick Mahomes maybe played one of his best games while here on planet Earth in that victory over Breach's Bengals.
As a visitor here on planet Earth.
As a visitor, clearly. He's going to be going back to Krypton when they rebuild the planet. But my concern, Breach, is when the pass rushers for Philadelphia start getting after it and getting into space and forcing him off his spot. How is Patrick Mahomes going to react after taking a hit or two? We know he can play with one leg if he remains relatively clean, but my concern is if he takes some hits like he did in that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers, does that change the dynamic of the game?
Right. I do think the answer is probably Mahomes' injury, like you just said, and he doesn't even have to take hit. We saw in the AFC Championship against the Bengals where he just threw off his back foot and that re-injured and re-aggravated the ankle. And he didn't even take a hit on that play. So something like that, and all of a sudden you have a gimpy Patrick Mahomes running around. And then it turns into Super Bowl 55 where the Buccaneers just sacking him left and right, and the Chiefs don't even score a touchdown, and this game turns into a blowout. But the thing with Jalen Hurts' injury, I feel like it's being I don't want to say downplay, but it's flying under the radar because Jalen Hurts hasn't really had to do anything since he's come back. He hasn't thrown for 200 yards in either of his past 2 games, which didn't matter because, the defense terrorized the Giants and the 49ers, and he's been held under 40 rushing yards in his past 3 games. So he hasn't done anything because he hasn't had to do anything. If the Chiefs jumped out to a 21-7 lead, then maybe it's Hurts' injury that's the big one.
Yeah, I think that he hasn't done, and I'm not questioning. You're factually correct. I don't think it's just he hasn't had to rush. They haven't had to run him because they blew out the teams they had to deal with on their way to the Super Bowl. Here.
There was a weird moment in the end of the Giants game where he ran like 4 straight times. So like, what are we doing here? I mean, maybe it was just as they say, he needed to get some contact to get going or whatever.
Well, and Brady Quinn has pointed out on the Pick Six podcast, our pal Brady Quinn, who I'm sure he's somewhere here working. Who knows? He's not really a big work guy. But anyway, Hurts it's more of a pain management thing for Hurts than anything else. And so it's basically what they want to do, the Eagles, is limit the amount of hits he takes if they can. However, this is the last game of the season, right? If they need Jalen Hurts to get out there, to run the ball, to use his body to pick up key yards. We saw him. They snuck him against the 49ers down there on the 2-yard line. They're not afraid to do it. I just think they want to minimize the pain management. For Mahomes, we flashed up how much it matters in terms of the offensive scheme. I actually think you can make a case that Mahomes' injury, the biggest thing is the Eagles' defensive scheme. In the sense that play you're talking about, Breach, where he rolled out left and threw off his back foot and landed on his plant foot, in a weird way and re-aggravated that ankle injury. If I'm the Eagles, and look, I'm not freaking, Belichick over here in terms of defensive schematics, right? But if I'm the Eagles, I'm loading up the left side of my defensive line, and I am forcing Mahomes to scramble that way and to throw off his back foot and to possibly re-aggravate that ankle injury. So I think that, to me, is a really interesting spot where can the Eagles force him into making that injury worse? I think it's easier to do that with Mahomes than it is to do with Hurts.
And the one thing I'll say just real quick is that if Mahomes gets hurt, if his ankle gets re-injured, the Chiefs' offense is non-functional. It is not going to work if Patrick Mahomes is just limping out there.
It can function, but it's going to be a big, big problem.
But if Jalen Hurts injures the shoulder, they can kind of switch the identity of their offense, kind of like I just said, the Mike hand switch here, where you just say, all right, you know what, we're going to hand off. We don't need to throw as many passes because Jalen's shoulder's hurt. So yeah, I think the Eagles are in better shape as far as the QB.
It sounds like Breach is trying to get Gardner Minshew in the game.
Yeah,
Coming back around.
Breach is a Gardner Minshew homer. Speaking of homers, you can tell that producer producer Billy put together some of these storylines because Jalen Hurts solidifies his stardom as best dual threat quarterback ever. It's not that crazy an idea, I guess, but I mean, like, all right, where do we stand if Jalen Hurts and the Eagles win the Super Bowl? What does it do for Jalen Hurts' career? Because again, like, this is a guy who was benched for Tua Tagovailoa in the championship game. Goes to Oklahoma, is called by the best running back in the Big 12, a scout or a GM or somebody told you that, and now he comes out and if he wins the Super Bowl at 24, like the Eagles are kind of loaded. I mean, the ceiling feels very, very high.
No, absolutely, and that's certainly no one's going to take that away from Jalen Hurts and the Eagles and how they built this team and Howie Roseman, certainly. But as you mentioned, podcast producer Billy, West Philadelphia born and raised, so it's clear that he has some Eagles leanings with some of the things he's saying here. And here, Breech, I have two names for you, and you tell me if Jalen Hurts, should he win the Super Bowl, is better than these two guys, Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson.
Well, okay, so right now he is not. Those guys, as far as what they were able to do on the ground through the air and their dual threatness, obviously Jalen Hurts isn't there. But if you win the Super Bowl, it kind of changes the dynamic of the question because obviously Michael Vick never won a Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson's never even made it to a conference title game. And so
MVP, though.
But he does have the MVP. But I think a lot of things with these dual threat guys, especially Lamar Jackson right now, is that they haven't been able to sustain the success.
Right. Yeah.
And so Jalen Hurts winning one Super Bowl, that definitely puts him in the conversation. I mean, Russell Wilson would be in the conversation as bad as he was last year. He still has 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 win.
Josh Allen.
Steve Young. Yeah. Obviously a legend, dual threat with only 1 Super Bowl win. So it definitely vaults Jalen Hurts up into top 5 if they get a Super Bowl
that's
win.
different than top, though.
Yeah. I think he's definitely top
3?
3? He's definitely top 3 of the Super Bowl win.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, like, because I mean, if Cam, I think it's a tough question. But I mean,
and Cam's another one. I didn't have Cam on the list. Another MVP, 2015. Now things didn't go well in the Super Bowl, but he got them to the Super Bowl.
But that's also like the Lamar, where the sustained success didn't happen. It just kind of went downhill after 2015. So you got to make sure Jalen Hurts is playing at a high level for the next 3 or 4 years at least.
I think that's right.
Okay, so I'm going to mix this one up a little bit in terms of the way that it's phrased in the storyline, because it's if Patrick Mahomes, like, is it buy or sell? Do you buy that Patrick Mahomes solidifies his status as the best quarterback in the NFL? I think he's already there. Like, I don't care.
Kenny Pickett would like a word, but go ahead.
Gardner Minshew as well?
Yes.
No, I mean, I think that what I think is interesting, if you want to do the whole legacy chat, and I'm not saying that we should, but just Patrick Mahomes, 27 years old. If he wins the Super Bowl on Sunday, he will likely win Super Bowl MVP. I mean, he's the odds-on favorite to win Super Bowl MVP. If at the age of 27, he has 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, and 2 MVPs, because he's going to win the MVP. We already know that 49-50 All-Pro votes. Man, I mean, if that's the case, he's been to 3 Super Bowls, and I know Tom Brady won his first 3. Or like Tom Brady just retired, and it's like there's no chance in Hades that anyone's ever going to sniff Tom Brady's career achievements. But like, I don't know, man. Can Patrick Mahomes? Like, did we start that talk already? If he wins the Super Bowl?
No, not that he's better than Tom Brady.
No, that he could be better. That he could chase Tom Brady.
No, I don't think so. I mean, when he signed that contract, that was for what felt like 40 years, Breech. The conversation was, well, I wonder what he'll accomplish by the time that contract expires, and as it relates to Tom Brady. And it's just a lot to ask. It's almost like the Jack Nicholson, Tiger Woods thing to cross over with golf. Tiger Woods was well on his way, and obviously all the off the course stuff sidetracked his career and the injuries and everything else. So we just don't know. Tom Brady was incredibly lucky. He had the 1 ACL in 2008, I believe. Yep. He wasn't a guy that was running around anyway. We know that Patrick Mahomes can sometimes he's at his best when he's off platform, and that leads to injuries. But I mean, if he's 1A, that's not a bad 1A to be, Breech. Just like this, if we're ranking the Pick Six podcast members, Brinson's 1 and you're a distant 1A, you're okay with that at the end of the day.
Wow, I'm 1. I'll take it.
That was the first time you've ever complimented Brinson. I think you should take it.
Somebody clip and save that comment.
But with Mahomes, the flip side, though, is, and this is why it's so difficult to catch Tom Brady and the 7 Super Bowl titles, is if you're Mahomes and the Chiefs lose on Sunday, you have now been to 5 conference title games, and you only have 1 Super Bowl to show for it. And granted, he's still the top quarterback in the NFL. You just said that. We've had that conversation before, and his legacy is still secure at only age 27. But there's no guarantee you're going to keep winning. We saw this, the Cowboys in the 90s. Troy Aikman probably thought he was going to win more than those 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, and then they haven't been back since 1995.
Well, I mean, just on the flip side of that, like, I mean, if you want to get, you could say if Mahomes loses this one, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you know.
Also, Monday golf action for you. Conclusion, round 4 of the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Sunday's play was suspended due to darkness, so it carried over into Monday. Brendan Todd entered the day down 2 strokes. We're going to pick him up at the 14th hole for birdie. 10 feet to go. And he pours that one into the middle of the cup. 15 under through 14. That gets him to 1 behind the leader, Justin Rose. But the day belonged to the 2013 U.S. Open champion. Entered the day 2 shots up. 11th hole for birdie, 26 feet out. Drops the long-range putt there. Now 2 shots up over Todd. Rose seeking his first win in 4 years. 13th hole for birdie, 19 feet out. He had the long-distance stick going on Monday. Gets it to fall on the right edge. 17 under. A 2-shot lead. Start the day par, birdie. But he was not done there. 14th hole for birdie. This time 7 feet away. That's easy. Nails it. 18 under. 3-shot lead for him. Looking to become the first European winner at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. 18th hole. Easy tap in for the win. Justin Rose wins the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. His 11th PGA Tour win, the first since he won the 2019 Farmers Insurance Open. He finishes at 18 under par. Brendan Todd, Brandon Wu both tied for second, 15 under for them. Then it was Denny McCarthy, Keith Mitchell, and Peter Malnati, all finishing at 14 under. For Rose, no player going back to 1947 has won the stroke play side of this event while making a hole-in-one that week. And afterwards, he spoke to Amanda Renner.
Justin, it took 4 years and a Monday finish, but you are officially a PGA Tour champion once again. What's the overwhelming emotion as you realize what you just accomplished for the 11th time out here?
Yeah, I mean, time flies by, doesn't it? It's amazing how long it's been. I did happen to have my breakfast this morning. I saw that come up on the Golf Channel, like 86 things and, you know, how many missed cuts. And I'm like, that's not great reading, but it's amazing how time does fly. And, you know, this is just a moment to say thanks to the people that believe in me more than probably I do. You know, my team have been incredible. Obviously, my family at home, Kate, Leo, Lottie, this one's for you guys. I wish you were here at Pebble with me. I mean, what a place to win a tournament. Unbelievable. But, yeah, to my squad, really, there's been a lot of people who rallied around me and just had an unbelievable week. Obviously as well, my partner James Gorman as well, and you know, wish he would have been side by side with me today. Obviously, unfortunately, amateurs couldn't make it, but yeah, incredible week from start to finish with so much happening in my favor.
This week had a lot happening. The Monterey Peninsula threw pretty much everything it had at you in this entire field. What did you have to lean into the most to make sure that you never let any of those distractions get under your skin, wear you down, and continue through? You know, that's the beauty of this tournament, and I think you should only come and tee up if you're willing to kind of have that attitude this week. You know, obviously there is a lot going on. There's amateurs, there's, you know, the odd bounce on the greens or bobbly putts or, you know, forecast that doesn't make sense. So, you know, there's a lot that can be thrown at you, but it's a wonderful tournament, and I hope this tournament still continues to go from strength to strength because, you know, it offers something different to the rest of the schedule. And yeah, like I said, you know, when you go side by side with the amateurs, I think there's something to that maybe, you know, keeps me a bit more mellow as well. So I've got to learn from it. 42 years old, you're just getting started this season, Justin. Congratulations.
Justin Rose, the winner of the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. 18 under par was his final score. Experience and a good breakfast. That's a good thing to wake up to on a Monday. He is the first player from Europe to win this event. He earns a spot at the 2023 Masters and at the PGA Championship. So a big win on multiple fronts for Justin Rose at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am on Monday.
Back to the Big Six podcast show here on CBS Sports HQ. Will Brinson, Ryan Wilson, and John Breech. Just electric chemistry up here on the set. Fantastic spot behind us.
I particularly love the giant cactus.
A big fan. There was I don't know if you saw it, there was actually a weird blue emoji thing out there, the costume, and also a poop emoji earlier, running around and dancing. It was like in the background, right behind Pete Prisco.
Interesting.
Which is fitting.
Yeah.
For various reasons. Anyway, let's talk Super Bowl. Obviously, Eagles and Chiefs. We talked about some revenge angles. We talked about some, these quarterbacks. They're such a key factor, as always with the quarterbacks, but especially in this particular game. I think from a strategic standpoint, like, this is the thing about the Super Bowl. Even if you just want to talk about like the sort of the bigger storylines, the Andy Reid revenge stuff, you could eat like an entire hour of content with it. But you could also talk about this, like, from a strategy standpoint. This is a really, really fascinating Super Bowl. I'll start with Travis Kelce, because he is the guy for this offense, for this Chiefs offense, Wilson. The Eagles' 1 weak spot is sort of the middle, the soft, chewy middle of their defense. They haven't really been tested by any tight ends. They've only allowed 3 touchdowns to tight ends this season. They haven't played anybody. Do you think they can, and how will they try to stop Travis Kelce?
Well, for starters, Breech, I would suggest not doing what the Jaguars did when they thought that Travis Kelce was invisible, and he went for 4 million yards in that game a few weeks ago. But it is a fair question, and you mentioned how good they've been against the limited tight ends they faced. And when you look at the numbers in terms of points allowed to various tight ends, they rank 10th, so they're doing okay, better than average. But this is going to be a different test, because Travis Kelce is arguably the best tight end in the NFL. I'm sure George Kittle would like a conversation, but that's a conversation for another time. So here's where I'm at on it. I think if the front four of that Eagles defense, which got after, starting with Hassan Reddick, can put pressure on Patrick Mahomes, as we talked about earlier, who's going to be on that bum ankle, it will limit Travis Kelce's effectiveness down the field. Now, he might get some quick throws for 5, 6, 7, 8 yards, but he's not going to be able to run those intermediate dig routes that go 15 yards in the air, and he gets another 15 on top of it. So he is going to get his catches, even with the fact that everyone else in that team is hurt, it feels like, at the wide receiver position. But I think that the Eagles, with their quickness up front, and with their mobility on the back end, will be able to limit, quote, in quotation marks, or bunny ears, you call them, Breech, what Travis Kelce can do.
Yeah, and this obviously is a big deal. But the thing is, every team goes into every game against the Chiefs, and they say, all we got to do is stop Travis Kelce, and we're probably going to win. And we just saw Travis Kelce's postseason stats. No one stops him in the playoffs. The Bengals in the regular season held him to under 60 yards. Couldn't do that in the postseason. He just finds a way to get open, and if you can't cover the middle of the field, he is going to terrorize you. And so the one thing is, I will give the Eagles a little bit of credit, is that they did a good job of stopping Travis Kelce when these two teams played last season. So you had a lot of the same defensive personnel in place.
Not sure if you're aware that Tyreek Hill,
well, that's where I was going with that, is that Tyreek Hill absolutely went off, but the Chiefs don't have that type of weapon to kind of replace that. So maybe the Eagles can at least slow him down. I don't think anybody's stopping Travis Kelce, and then obviously it's, can somebody fill in that Tyreek Hill gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you said. So, I mean, again, not Belichick here, schematically from a deep.
Yeah, the Belichick podcast.
Right, the Bill Belichick podcast. We'll take that. But the point being is, like, if you can get the front four home and you rotate in these guys, on these, you have these rotational pass rushers coming in, this wave of guys who stay fresh, you can keep putting pressure on Mahomes, and you guys on the back end can cover, then the Eagles can run away with this game because they can bracket Travis Kelce and force, you're asking Marcus Valdes-Scantling. And, like,
for the record, I don't think they can run away with it, but I understand where you're going.
Probably can't run away with it. I'm just saying that, like, if you can truly limit Kelce and also get home with your pass rush and cover those guys on the back end, like, and those things kind of go hand in hand, right? You get home with the pass rush, a lot easier to cover on the back end. You cover really well on the back end, a lot easier to get home with the pass rush. So I think the bottom line is you're going to bracket and double team the living hell out of Travis Kelce and force the Chiefs to beat you in some other form or fashion. Maybe that form or fashion is the screen game. We've seen a lot of Isaiah Pacheco in the last 2 weeks. Is it possible that Andy Reid is pulling the old triple deke that we from Flying Ducks, and that he's really planning to go back to Jerick McKinnon and screen this Eagles defense to keep pressure off Mahomes, to get Travis Kelce open, to force them to adjust?
Well, it is rarely the case, Breech, where Andy Reid is out schemed. So he will have a plan, and I think Brinson's exactly right. It starts with Pacheco, it starts with McKinnon. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be active for this game, so perhaps he finds some way to get involved. And Travis Kelce runs a lot of tight end screens as well. either on the outside or in the middle. We see him do that. So I think there's going to be a plethora of options at Andy Reid's disposal, especially given that Patrick Mahomes won't be the same old mobile Patrick Mahomes. And we've seen them run tight end screens to tight ends that are second, third, fourth on the depth chart. So I think all stops are out. We see them do the turnaround. You see them do the circle and the huddle. I think we're going to see a couple of those sorts of things to try to at least distract that really active Eagles defense, and part of that I think will be the screen game.
Yeah, they might break out the ring around the Rosie huddle in the Super Bowl. But yeah, I think that the one thing is, if you want to slow down a team that is great at rushing the passer, which the Eagles are, the third most sacks in a single season NFL history. They could move up to number one if they sack Patrick Mahomes 5 times in the Super Bowl. And the screen obviously is the way to slow down the pass rush. But the Chiefs don't have to add that to their game plan because it's already there. They already do it all the time. And so if they can get off a couple successful screens early in the game, then what happens? The Eagles pass rush has to start paying attention to that and can't just go all out going after Mahomes. So I think that will be a big deal on how successful the screens are.
And worth noting, you can see it on the screen here if you're watching on CBS Sports HQ, which hopefully you are. 82 sacks, 80 sacks for the 84 and 85 Bears. Those are the only teams the Eagles are behind. That is an insane stat. This is a really, really good pass rush team.
If you are in any statistical box with the 1985 Bears defense, you are clearly doing something right, because that is, mostly considered the greatest defense of all time.
Absolutely. From a Chiefs defensive perspective, I think it's really interesting, or maybe you want to call it an Eagles offensive perspective, however you want to approach it, Wilson. What do you think? What do we think the Eagles are going to do, and how are they going to attack offensively? Against the Steelers and the Titans earlier this year, we saw them try to go up top. They decided they wanted to throw deep. They weren't scared of taking vertical shots because they knew those teams were going to stack the box on them, and they wanted to stop the run. And so you have to think, what do the Chiefs do defensively? What do they try and stop first? Do they try and slow down Miles Sanders and the Jalen Hurts rushing attack? Because if you load the box, you're putting a bunch of young cornerbacks on an island with guys like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and of course, you got Dallas Goedert out there as well.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing. But I will say this, Breech, and for people who don't know, Breech is a huge Bengals homer, perhaps the biggest on earth. His dad was the great Jim Breech, the kicker for the Bengals in the 80s and 90s. But I say all that to say, in the AFC Championship game, what we saw was a lot of injuries on the back end for the Chiefs, and the young guys had to step up. Josh Williams stepped up. Trent McDuffie stepped up. They weren't expected to play as much as they did in the roles that they did, and they made plays when they had to down the stretch. Now, did they get exposed at times? Yes, but they were able to bounce back. But to answer your question, Brinson, I think you have to stop the run first and then deal with the downfield stuff later, because if you don't stop the run, the Eagles are going to keep running the ball, and that's going to be a wrap.
Yeah, and I think if you would have asked the Bengals, hey, look, all these young Chiefs guys are going to be playing in the secondary, you're loving that if you're the Bengals, and they did such a good job of slowing them down. And this team's not going to be intimidated by Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, because they just went against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Did those guys make a couple big plays? Yeah, great receivers are going to do that. But they weren't getting burnt left and right. So I do agree with Wilson. If you're Kansas City, I think you just go all in to stop the run, because you do not want to get burnt by that. And if Jalen Hurts is dealing with that shoulder injury, just say, hey, look, let's see if he can pass on us, and let's trust our young guys in the secondary.
Well, and you have Chris Jones, of course, battling up front against Jason Kelce. I think it's fascinating to consider when you have, look, the Kelce brothers, right? First brothers ever to play in the Super Bowl. I mean, I love our podcast. I'm not saying their podcast is better, but their podcast is really, really good and very entertaining. These guys are two of the biggest entertainers, two of the most colorful characters in all of professional football, and they're going here head to head. How do you? I know they don't match up, they won't play each other clearly, but how do we think that storyline shakes out here in the grand scheme of things of the Super Bowl?
Well, if anything, Breech, it'll probably end up being a storyline on their podcast, whether they decide to call it quits or whatever their future may hold. But they're sort of fun stories, because I was talking to our guy Rick Spielman, who I do the With the First Pick podcast before the show, just about where he had them slotted when he was the GM with the Vikings. And the issue with Travis Kelce was that he didn't block. And back then, inline tight ends needed to block. And obviously, we know what he's turned into. And then you see Jason Kelce with his Batman mask. He was, quote unquote, undersized coming out as a center. He is rarely moved off the spot now. So they're both incredibly important to what they do on their respective sides of the ball. I don't want to say who's more important. Obviously, Travis Kelce is the premier pass catcher on that team. That offensive line in Philadelphia has been outstanding in large part because of what Kelce brings in the middle. And if you lose any one of those 5 guys, that's an issue for Jalen Hurts and the rest of the guys behind him. But it's a fantastic story of 2 guys from Cincinnati who have made it, and they also, by the way, have a good podcast.
Yes, I would been remiss if I didn't mention, but Ryan did, is that, yeah, they both went to the University of Cincinnati. I do think it's a fascinating matchup. As someone who has a brother, I think here's how this happens, is that no matter who wins, one of these guys is
I also have a brother.
Well, then you should know. One of these guys is going to get a Super Bowl ring, and you're wearing that to every family function for the rest of time, saying,
hey,
remember that time I beat you in the Super Bowl, bro?
You don't give the middle finger anymore. You give the
ring finger. That's it. Hey, look, you see that, man?
So what do you think about this? What do you think about the idea? I don't know if it's a online petition or not, that the Kelce's mom should do the coin flip.
I'm all for it.
I like it.
Look, if I'm the Kelce brother who wins the Super Bowl, I'm getting.
But you want to lose the coin flip, remember?
I'm getting like a giant hat. You know, like you see like
the big hat.
Yeah, the big hat. No. Like the hat is just going to be the ring. And I'm going to wear it to like Thanksgiving and be like, hey. What's up, buddy? How we doing? Although wait, they both have Super Bowl rings there, so that's fine. Like that's
right. That's why it's even better.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like because you don't want to show up. You know, like Eli Manning and Peyton Manning have talked about this, where it's like it was a little awkward when Eli had 2 and Peyton only had 1, because it's like everybody knows.
And especially because Eli beat the guy who tortured Peyton.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And Peyton, pretty. I think you could say that Peyton's career better than Eli's as a whole, pretty obviously, right? But Eli had the 2 Super Bowl rings, so he was always a little awkward. Speaking of Jason Kelce, I think this is another Billy question, but Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham, possible retirees. I actually wouldn't. Is Lane Johnson too old, too young to retire?
I think he's in his early 30s.
This Eagles team, like we talk about it, is like if Hurts wins this one, they've got tons of time to keep winning and keep coming out there. But I mean, there's a decent chance we could see some of these Eagles guys walk away, right?
So if they win, I think the good news is that, and we talk about this all the time, you have a quarterback on his rookie deal, and then that might encourage the old timers, quotation marks, who might have been considering retirement. Let's take one more run at this. Maybe even if you lose, you have that conversation because
the $20.
Yeah, yikes. But I mean, Tom Brady took a discount, but it wasn't the rookie deal like we saw with Russ Wilson and Carson Wentz before his injuries sort of sidetracked his career. So I think that might be the conversation, Breach. And maybe it's more the case that if you lose, you're more likely to come back than if you win because you've accomplished it, and it's incredibly difficult to go back to back.
It's funny. I would have used to think that if you lose, you're more likely to come back. But I feel like if you win, you're now more likely to come back because you're thinking, man, nobody's repeated in 18 years. Okay. Why can't we be the first team to repeat? I feel like we saw that with a lot of the Buccaneers after the 2020 win. Aaron Donald was on the verge of retirement, said, no, you know what? Let's try and go out and repeat.
Sean McVay was going to take tons of money from Amazon.
And so that is, you're enticed by the thought of, hey, look, why don't we go out and try and get that first repeat since 2003, 2004 Patriots? So I think that part of it, and like you guys said, the Eagles nucleus is there. They're all going to be coming back, and this team's loaded if these guys don't retire. So, yeah, I think if they do win, that these guys will get some serious thought. I think they will come back.
I think so, too. You look at these guys, and, man, look, like this Philly team, you hear A.J. Brown, you hear Jalen Hurts all season long talk about it. They really like each other. They have incredible chemistry. This is a team that's had fun. You see all the Batman masks, reminiscent of the dog mask that they rolled in 2017. And you have these guys who... a lot of veterans who understand what it takes to win a Super Bowl who've been there. And if they win another one, it's like, look, the NFC, Tom Brady just retired. Aaron Rodgers might get traded to the AFC. The NFC could be not barren, just a much easier pathway to getting back to the Super Bowl for those Eagles. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. Hassan Reddick, Chris Jones, 2 maybe the more underrated guys in terms of, we're talking about them last, so sure, why not? What do we think when we look at these guys? Who makes the bigger impact, Wilson, in this game? Hassan Reddick, or is it Chris Jones in terms of their pass rush? And which one who affects this game more?
That's the question. So 15.5 sacks on the season for Chris Jones, 16 for Hassan Reddick. We saw all the damage he did in the playoffs. And I think perhaps the edge slightly goes to Hassan Reddick, Breach. And I say that because he has so many other guys that can get after it. Hargrave, Sweat, Graham, all those guys have 11 sacks. Fletcher Cox had 7 sacks. And I think that's going to make his job a little easier. And I think that at the end of the day, Reddick, who was undersized, was sort of played out of position when he was drafted. And he came over to Philadelphia and is flipped switch, Temple guy, and he's doing everything that they need him to do. I think Chris Jones is going to have an impact, just not quite as big an impact as Hassan.
Yeah, you mentioned all those guys, the Eagles front four, they're literally the only team in NFL history that has had 4 players with 10 or more sacks in a single season. I mean, that is a mind-blowing number. And so, yeah, I do think that if you're the Chiefs, you're the offensive line, you can't say, oh, we're just going to focus on Hassan Reddick and keep him out of the backfield, because then one of those other guys is going to get you. Whereas you can kind of do that with Kansas City and kind of focus on Chris Jones and make sure he's not the guy that beat you. Although, you know, the Bengals tried to do that in the AFC Championship game, and Chris Jones got the monkey off his back, finally got his first playoff sack, and maybe, you know, that's breaks the dam, and he's getting a bunch of sacks. But I do think Hassan Reddick probably has the bigger game.
I think it's going to be close. Both guys are going to have massive impacts, and it's like if you can get Chris Jones in that disruption up front, even though the edge pressure by Hassan Reddick is key, the pressure up the middle is absolutely debilitating for the Chiefs. We're not going to make picks today because we got all week of coverage here from the Super Bowl LVII. Pick Six Podcast will be here. You can check out the Pick Six Podcast wherever you get your podcasts as well. Listen on Spotify, listen on Apple Podcasts, and of course, CBS Sports HQ is live from Phoenix. The very handsome Chris Hassel. You can watch him on Fire TV. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. For Breech, for Wilson, I'm Brinson. We will see you guys tomorrow.